All right. Hello, everyone. Hope you're ready for one last discussion today. My name is Julia Meisel. I'm a manager with RMI's Urban Transformation Program, which helps cities move from climate goals to climate action, and I lead our urban nature work. For this discussion, we'll focus on nature as a solution to help cities beat the heat and to help them reduce emissions. So we've heard several times in the previous two panels about the importance of nature as heat resilience and resilience more generally in cities. We absolutely agree that that is very much true. But we think that this climate mitigation piece is somewhat overlooked, and so that's what we will focus on here. I'm going to briefly present some new analysis from RMI on urban nature's climate mitigation potential. And then we'll hear from two speakers on financing considerations and nature's place in urban climate action. Yesterday, we launched a new report, Growing to Its Potential, that makes the case for urban nature as an effective climate mitigation strategy and one that needs more investment. This is the first time we're sharing our findings here today, and the report really justifies the investment we need to scale up urban nature, as we heard in the previous discussion of the Nature for Cool Cities Challenge. So today I am going to hopefully very briefly go through how much value urban nature can generate, what we need to spend to unlock that value, and then we'll look at climate and other benefits in more detail, and finally, what comes next. So it's not revolutionary at all to say that urban nature is valuable, but previously cities didn't have, and generally the public didn't have, a cumulative global number for how much value urban nature generates around the world. So we did this analysis and found that between 2023 and 2050, it's a cumulative 59 trillion that nature in cities could potentially generate. And I'll get into the details of what that means. But that also comes out to approximately 3 trillion a year, and that's net benefits. So keep that 59 trillion in mind. To get those benefits, we need investment. Of course. So we need to invest on average $135 billion annually from 2023 to 2030. And then, of course, we also need all of the spending to maintain all of that nature, all of those investments, and that increases gradually over time as there are more investments being made. So taking these together, the cumulative 66 trillion benefits, 7 trillion in cumulative costs, that gives us a benefit cost ratio of 9-to-1, which is a pretty good return and on par or exceeding other major investments you might have in mind. But where are we now? Scaling up investment is critical to unlocking all this value. The Sharm el-Sheikh adaptation agenda that launched last week recognized this, and it called for $1 trillion investment in urban nature by 2030 based on our analysis. But right now, we're only investing $32 billion a year, and that's that 0.3% of infrastructure spending that Sophie mentioned at the beginning of the event if you were there. That's very, very tiny. That is less than what was spent on cryptocurrency last year. We want the 135 billion, so we have about 100 billion investment gap. 135 billion sounds like a substantial amount of money, but it's still only 1% of what cities are expected to spend on infrastructure in 2030. So I'm going to dive into the benefit side of this a little bit more, as well as now the climate mitigation side. The 59 trillion in net benefits comes from us building a valuation based on health, environmental, direct economic, and social benefits. I'm going to go through each very quickly. And this health benefits to start with. This is about 2/3 of the total 66 trillion in benefits. This is what Samir was referring to in the first session for any of you who were there for that extreme heat and the other challenges that nature can address, they're not just challenges, they have real impact on people's lives. They can cause loss of life. So this 45 trillion in health benefits that we estimated is in large part because of the lives saved, the avoided mortality, the avoided injury and illness. Environmental benefits, I think most of these should be familiar to folks. Again, there's this energy and carbon savings piece that I will get into. Direct economic benefits, there's the potential, these investments have the potential to create 59 million jobs by 2030. There are direct cost savings in using green solutions as a replacement for conventional solutions in many cases. And of course, there's business value created with particular products. And finally, social benefits, and this is probably an underestimate of the value of the social benefits because many of them are intangible. And finally now, I will get to what I've been teasing the whole time, which is the energy and carbon savings piece. We did city-level analysis on this because, again, it's an area that hasn't been robustly quantified. So cities that are interested in using nature to help meet their climate goals don't have the information on what they could actually be getting in terms of emissions reductions at the city level. So we wanted to try to fill this gap by looking at 3 areas: reducing mechanical cooling loads and building energy use, avoiding the embodied carbon of gray stormwater infrastructure, and encouraging more walking, biking, and public transit on shaded streets instead of driving. I'm going to go we looked at 6 cities in the report, but I'm going to go through 2 examples relatively quickly, and I'll share the code for the report so that you can dive into the detail of all 6 cities. But starting with buildings, nature's cooling effect reduces the need for air conditioning, which lowers both overall building energy use and peak demand. We model... Sorry, bit of a lag. Thank you. That's where the receiver is. Okay, here we go. And so we modeled that energy reduction and peak demand reduction when we increased canopy in Sacramento, California from 20% to 35%. These seem like modest savings, but at a time when cities need every tool in the climate toolbox, they are savings. They also do have real impacts. That peak demand of 1 to 3%, that reduction, that's enough to keep polluting power plants offline when everyone has their air conditioners turned on, reducing air pollution, reducing health impacts. It's also enough to avoid building new generation capacity because of the constraint on demand. Second, green stormwater infrastructure. So green stormwater infrastructure features can absorb rain where it falls and reduce flooding as a result. And if properly planned, can replace conventional gray stormwater infrastructure in many cases, which is expensive and carbon intensive and often very disruptive to the areas where it's being installed or repaired. There's also a really good opportunity for areas of new urban development or cities that are expanding very, very quickly, or as I think Elizabeth mentioned, haven't even been built yet. There's an opportunity to use green stormwater infrastructure to minimize flood risk before it even starts. So we used Ahmedabad, India as an example of this. The city is developing really rapidly, and on its eastern edge, there are many small natural lakes. And as the city develops, it can either fill in these lakes, pave over them, and build on top, and then have to build additional stormwater capture infrastructure to avoid flooding. Or it can preserve many of these lakes, develop around them, and maintain the existing green-blue features for stormwater capture and avoiding putting people in harm's way by building on those flood risk zones. So we compared the a conventional gray infrastructure scenario you can see on the left of each chart, and green scenarios, as well as a low impact scenario, which is hybrid or less carbon intensive materials. And in the green scenario, you can see these really significant reductions of 92% cost reduction and 87% embodied carbon reduction. We heard this in the last panel, but want to make sure we mention it again. Urban nature can be a really important tool for equity, but only if we break historical investment patterns, if we invest differently and in a way that does make sure that we have cooling for all, not just for those who can afford air conditioning, that we're protecting flood-prone communities, and that we are enhancing safe mobility options for everyone, regardless of their access to different modes of transportation. Okay, finally, what comes next? What do we do with all of this? We have to close the investment gap. We have to unlock those benefits and tackle inequity. We have some thoughts about how to do that. In the previous segment, Kathy from Arstock said we need better access to financing by the next COP, so we need to make that happen. Here are some of the options that we are thinking about and that we hope you might consider. Of course, there's the launching of the challenge. We heard about how bringing together cities, investors, and technical assistance will accelerate solutions development and send a demand signal. Urban trees provide many benefits beyond carbon sequestration that could be incorporated into a product that goes beyond a typical forest carbon credit. And this could include attributes like the energy and carbon savings we were discussing, biodiversity, resilience, equity, or really any other attribute that a corporate or other buyer was looking for. Urban projects are small, urban nature projects are small, but developers could aggregate these projects or incorporate them as part of a larger project portfolio to make them more bankable. And finally, this isn't relevant to all electricity markets, but where possible, including trees in a utility's asset valuation would incentivize the utility to pay for tree planting, taking the burden off cities and residents. So, to sum it up, we have a lot of value at stake, and we need to quadruple investment to get there. These are overlooked solutions that cities don't spend enough on, but $135 billion a year is achievable, and cities don't need to and shouldn't have to do it alone. We do need financial innovation, but we have the foundation to start innovating. We need to take everything we know about municipal finance and financing nature and carbon markets, and we need to apply it, and we need to replicate it in cities across the globe. So RMI is ready to get started on this. We invite cities and investors and other partners to join us. I want to make sure we have plenty of time for our speakers, but this code is for our report. Please take a look and download. If we do have extra time at the end, I'm happy to answer questions, but otherwise I will stick around after the event to discuss or answer questions about the report or this work. And do check out the report for all 6 cities that we analyzed, as well as more information on that global valuation. Okay, I'll finally stop talking. I want to make sure that we can hear what experts have to say about this. I will invite up Rohit Sen, who is the head of sustainable energy for ICLEI, and Aditi Maheshwari, who's with the Business Climate Department at the International Finance Corporation. So please come on up, take a seat. I will move myself as well. Okay. Is this one up? Yes. All right. I understand the pain everyone else felt now. All right. First question for Rohit. How can nature fit as one of cities' strategies for reaching their climate and energy security goals?
Um, well, first of all, thanks a lot for the presentation. It's something very interesting for me from where I come from, looking at transition of cities to 100% renewables, achieving net zero, climate neutrality, and all. What I understand is integrated climate action is needed, and is something that energy action with the biodiversity concern, nature solutions need to go hand in hand. I mean, it's completely understood and clear from also from your presentation that these solutions reduce the need of energy, the demand side, as well as from the cooling part, as we are focusing here on urban cooling, the implementation for the renewable energy part or clean energy assets would also be comparatively less in size. So, for me, I would like to integrate the two together and see what can be achieved, not just technology-wise, but also economic value-wise. You say that there is a return in value of investment. How about this investment gets clubbed into the energy assets? And it's not just about generation assets. You mentioned energy efficiency. And to achieve it, we need to do not just generation, efficiency, but also conservation. So all these three things need to work together. And for nature-based solutions, going hand in hand in parallel with energy assets as well as the climate action that we are looking at, is very important. And that's why cities, the local authorities need to make sure that when they develop their climate and energy action plans, they look at these opportunities, these solutions, so that when they holistically plan for the cities to transition, these things are taken into consideration and not worked out in silos. The projects then need to be taken. So you talking about green roofs. You're talking about blue solutions. I would think, how can I combine, let's say, a floating solar photovoltaic with the technology that can be on the, let's say, a blue solution, if that's possible technologically. If yes, then can I combine the economic aspect of it? So then I will be looking at an investment on both the solutions, and that would be a beneficial for any investor, because the returns could be clubbed, and so on. The business model would be also benefiting the stakeholders. So from my side, I am very much seeing that this is something that is benefiting the overall transition, and the solution would be to integrate from the policy angle that such projects that come in the future or are existing are making sure that they are integrated with the nature-based solution.
Absolutely. Yes, I really like that layer of the economic integration laying on top of the technological innovation that was mentioned in the previous session. Aditi, so challenges exist to financing both municipal projects and financing nature-based solutions. What success stories and lessons from municipal finance are relevant for financing nature in cities?
Thanks so much, Julia. Okay, volume-wise. Well, good question, and thanks so much for having me here, and great analysis. It's amazing to think about all this value that's there, but how do you monetize it? How do you bring finance to actually incorporate it into decision making? And so, as a starting point, we already know that, particularly in emerging markets, for cities' ability to make climate-smart investments are constrained by their budgets and constrained by, so they need to reallocate existing budgets, and they also then need to think about how you increase your sources of finance. Your sources of finance typically for cities are taxes, tariffs, and funding from national governments, and how do you then, and in many emerging market cities, they are constrained in terms of what they can do to access external financing because of national regulations, and then on top of that you have other challenges like creditworthiness, lack of bankable, investable project pipeline, the ability to access finance in local currency, which is critical, and then you layer the great example from Tel Aviv was amazing. You know, for nature-based solutions, you have to align across multiple sectors quite often to ensure financing flows. So there are these perceived risks by private sector to invest in them, and so cities are now trying to think about different financing instruments that they can use to try and move this forward, not just in nature-based solutions, but more broadly as well in the municipal finance. You've got green bonds, you have pooled municipal bonds, land value capture mechanisms. There are a whole bunch of different instruments that are now being deployed, and I wanted to give 3 examples. One, in the context of Brazil, in Rio de Janeiro, it's CPAC bonds. CPAC bonds are certificates of potential additional construction. So in Rio, you have there is legislation that defines how construction should be, and so if investors and developers want to build above that level or build beyond that, then they have to purchase bonds, and the value of these bonds varies by building type, and so governments can incentivize green construction through requiring fewer CPAC bonds to be purchased for green buildings. So you can incentivize green roofs, green construction in that way, and then they auction these permits to investors and developers, and the revenue that's generated is then invested into low carbon infrastructure. But then the other examples that I have are actually from developed countries that can be deployed, that have been deployed in very much in the nature-based solutions context, but haven't yet seen transpired in emerging markets. So one example is Washington, D.C., where they have a very old sewer system, and it overflows into the rivers, and so what they've started is a system around stormwater retention credits, which program, which the regulation requires developers to keep a percentage of rainwater captured on site, and if they're unable to do so, then they have to purchase credits, and they can purchase these credits on the voluntary market or through the government at a guaranteed price. And so this money, it's incentivizing private sector investment into this space. It's investing, and they're getting them to invest in green infrastructure, nature-based solutions, so green roofs, permeable surfaces, rainwater capture, rain gardens, etc., etc. So that's one. And last example that I wanted to give very quickly is New York. And New York has done something. It's one of the largest programs like this. It is also around drainage and green nature-based solutions, but it's a private property retrofit program. And so what they've done is they've created an incentive program where they've used $53 million in funding, grant funding, and technical assistance to support developers to try and put in place managing stormwater on site. And then they've created tax abatement for green roofs and permeable surfaces, replacing asphalt. They've regulated for new builds to all have stormwater capture. And so they've generated, by going for this green-gray mix in solutions, they've capital savings of $1.5 billion, and they've leveraged $1 billion in private finance into this space, so through the incentive structure. So these are solutions that are coming in that bring in the private financing, but we need to find a way to deploy them at scale in all markets.
Thank you for sharing those examples. Yes, that is the end statement, right? We need to find the solutions that can replicate and that can scale. But those seem like good starting points. One question for both of you: what are you most optimistic about regarding the future of nature in cities? And Rohit.
Okay, you want me go first? Um, I mean, for me, the way I see it, there's one very important thing that is land. Yeah, cities, especially mega cities, if you look at the demand of energy, is much more that they can meet from within the resources. Yeah, so most of the big cities like Frankfurt, Berlin, or London that we work with in the transition, they do not have the resources to even feed what their demand today is. Forget about 2030 and 2040. So therefore, we need to make sure that, especially in the global south, when the cities do their spatial planning and land management, we need to have this integrated solution way forward to which action is needed to a particular land. And therefore, multiple solutions, if can be created on a one particular land, or the roof, or whatever space available, even building facades, should be used. And the second thing is data. That something is very important. All the data that you mentioned from the nature-based solutions will be very critical to even design anything on an energy asset. Even if I want to add the solar PV on the facade or on the green roofs and so on. So these are certain things that I look forward to through policy interventions and also through various mechanisms on collecting them, because we often see that that is a challenge, and even when the cities are reporting back on them.
So I think, analysis like yours but what we're seeing is growing awareness, not just across cities, but also private sector, in terms of the benefits of nature-based solutions. There's a greater understanding about there being lower cost solutions in many cases that address multiple challenges. And we've already heard about the health benefits that you talked about, but also have massive improvement on the quality of life of urban citizens. So in terms of being able to drive that political will component earlier, that linkage to quality of life for urban citizens, I think, is really important. But we're also seeing an increased focus from the investment community, which I think is a really important direction of travel. You're seeing, with the emergence of taxonomies, new financial instruments, the fact that the investors are now paying attention is important. And the thing that I would say where we should really prioritize and focus is pick the sectors where you're seeing the benefits most clearly and drive them forward. So my personal opinion, the water sector and construction sector are kind of where you can see real tangible benefits and wins. And if we can focus on that and get municipal governments to align their multiple actors around coordination on those ones and move those forwards, that would be a big win.
All right, thank you both again. We do have a few minutes if there are any questions.
Thanks very much. I'm Anthony Pierce from WWF. I just realised on Thursday that we have the first meeting of Ministers for Urbanisation and Climate. And they're going to be announcing the launch of this SURGE initiative, the Sustainable Urban Resilience for the Next Generation, I think. So I'm just wondering, this is a perfect chance for this sort of stuff to be discussed there. I'm wondering what our way of inputting this into the system can be, and if there's been any efforts to do that. I know ICLEI is one of the sort of pushes behind all this, and will be running running the entire initiative in a way. But perhaps you can comment, or do you know, because it's a pretty important area and this is a great opportunity to take advantage of.
Well, thanks a lot for that question, and unfortunately I do not have the whole details yet. I think more will be revealed in the next days, but I understand that that many partners, including ICLEI, are working on it. There will be 3 or 4, I think, working groups where certain organizations will take lead, including the national government and one of local governments and so on. So they are focusing on waste, energy, and I think a couple of other 2. Completely not aware of that. but it is something that is being taken up, and ICLEI with other partners is looking how to integrate with ICLEI's own policies as well, that we can reflect upon this initiative as well.
Any other questions? We have time for one more.
So with the urban nature report, I'm just curious how you vetted it with cities themselves. Like, what was the engagement process? Was this part of a needs assessment, them saying that we need this analysis to put it within our budgets to create this evidence base?
Great question. A combination of factors. We did do needs assessments with several cities to understand their level of interest in potentially scaling up nature-based solutions. We also had some more technical criteria in terms of what is the stormwater management, the extent of the stormwater management challenges in a particular city, what is the potential for scaling up urban nature. And we now want to make sure that we are re-engaging with the 6 cities that we did the analysis on, so that we can understand how now that they have it and it's concrete and not just conceptual, how can they use it? What is the next step? So that we can build on that for further analysis to feed into efforts like the Nature for Cool Cities Challenge and ICLEI's cities with nature. Yep. Yeah. So yeah, want to make sure that it then completes the loop and gets back out there. Do we have time?
I do have one question for you too. What can cities in emerging markets learn from those in more developed markets?
I think there are organizations like C40 and ICLEI that try to do just that, right? Try to bring cities together to share best practices and learn from each other's experience of implementation. In that context, I think there are solutions that are deployed where there are technologies, there are solutions that are available, and understanding what has worked, what hasn't worked, what the enabling conditions were that actually helped implementation and bring in the different sources of financing, I think is what is going to be most beneficial in terms of that transfer, and to be able to see how that can then be replicated in a local context. Like I said, I was looking for examples. When Julia and I talked about this panel, I started looking for, okay, what are the solutions that have been deployed, nature-based solutions, private sector financing, okay, let's go. And then I gave you 2 examples from the US. So, and I was thinking about, because I work in emerging markets, so that's what I wanted to do. And so the solutions are there, that's what I would say. Like, I ended up, like, you pick the ones that are technically feasible. So some of these solutions are only going to be workable in cities where there are buoyant housing markets, where you're going to be able to realize value gain in real estate value that brings the investors in, right? That kind of thing. It's not going to be applicable everywhere.
Yeah. Okay, thank you both again. Really appreciate your perspectives. To round us out now, I'm going to pass over to Graham Maidment from UK Base for some concluding thoughts.
Thanks very much, Julia. That was fantastic, really interesting, learning from the ground. We've had a trilogy of events here, and it's been absolutely amazing. I've sat at the back and watched and just seen the energy that's come from the floor and seen the people that have come in and out, and lots of people have stayed, which is always a good sign. Okay, people stay, they're enjoying it. 3 hours is a long time. So I've got to close this event, and I actually think I'd like to start by saying thank you. Okay, thank you to some people who are not in the room that have done a lot of work in the background. So I'm part of Mission Innovation, and my colleague Piero is on the call. Piero's done an amazing amount of work, but there's others as well. So Ian Campbell and Axum, who are here, they started the Beating the Heat project probably 18 months ago, 2 years ago, okay, along with Sophie, who is there, okay, Irene, who's on the call, Lily from the Cool Coalition. And we've recently been working really closely with Owen and Kurt from the ArseRock Extreme Heat Alliance. And of course, I need to mention Brian and Ben. And Ben's not here, okay? We joined forces on the nature-based solutions. So it's a tremendous amount of work from lots and lots of people. I just wanted to start by saying a little bit about the stark statistics that we've been talking about today. It's a bit depressing, actually. The latest IPCC report cites 1.5 degrees of warming. Something like 2.3 billion people are at risk, and unfortunately, they're often the most vulnerable. As we continue to urbanise, cooling is going to become much more important, so the impact of that cooling on the urban poor is going to impact massively, and that came out very much from today. I think left unchecked, emissions are expected to double and from cooling by 2030 and triple by 2010. And the impact is going to be very significant. A stat I've got here is 1 billion people exposed to lethal heat by 2050. So Martina started with 356,000 deaths this year, which is terrible, okay? Of course, this is terrible, but 1 billion by 2050, that's disastrous, absolutely disastrous. We've heard a lot about some tools. Sophie mentioned some tools today. Kathy on the ArseRock Extreme Heat platform. We heard from Manuel, who said that local governments and national governments need to work together much better. Kathy and Cassie mentioned the importance of having political champions, and Dr. Burrs said we need to work together. There were some really good examples from Samir and Minesh from India, and we need to learn from each other. So the Heat Action Plan in India, there's 100 cities that are saving hundreds of lives in those cities per year using this Heat Action platform. We spoke about finance quite a bit, and I think that's really important because finance gets neglected. So we heard about from Joanna, there was some range of financing solutions starting with low cost, zero cost. And we just heard just briefly from Julia about the values and the benefits of urban nature. 59 trillion, okay? That's amazing. I couldn't even count the zeros after that. And the ratio is 9-to-1 of investment, and that's brilliant. So tomorrow we have the Nature for Cool Cities Challenge, which Brian, you're going to be presenting, not here, okay, in the SE for All Pavilion at 9 o'clock, okay? Just to remind everyone, I got it wrong earlier on. It's tremendous that we're launching that here. Nature-based solutions bring us lots and lots of benefits. So I just wanted to conclude with just talk a little bit more about COP27. COP27's not done, but we're starting to talk about COP28, and I'm gonna blame Elizabeth for this. I'm going to blame her, and it's going to be called Elizabeth's Cool COP, the ECC. Okay, it's got quite a nice ring about it. Okay, yeah, and and we should tell everyone that the UAE is going to be the cool COP, and yeah, I think it should be. It needs to be, but we need to convince others. So over the next 12 months, the Cool Coalition will be trying to rally support from everyone to make that happen. Final thing is, I just wanted to leave you one point. I haven't mentioned everyone today. There's been some tremendous speakers, okay? But Paul mentioned one final statement, okay? We need to have solidarity and a shared journey. And if we've got that solidarity and shared journey, together we can beat the heat and deliver on sustainable cooling. So I look forward to seeing you tomorrow, 9 a.m. at SEE for all launch of the challenge. 9 a.m. on Thursday in here for the Buildings Breakthrough. Advertise again. And thank you very much. Nice to see you all.